Hey anglers, today I want to talk about a walleye technique I like to use all the way from early spring to midsummer walleye bite. What this is a modified Lindy Rig. It's a great technique because it's something you can use offshore, in boat, in kayak, and catch a lot of walleyes. So if next time you're fishing for walleyes and you're struggling with crankbaits, you're on a rock pile or a piece of structure and you're jigging, you're not catching any fish, don't be afraid to try this modified Lindy Rig, and it might help you catch some fish. One of the great things about it is you're putting live bait in front of a fish and you're letting that fish do the work for you. If there's fish in that area and they see it and they're wanting to eat, good chance they're going to pick this up. If you're drifting or trolling, the nice thing I like about this versus maybe jigging over a piece of structure, if you're not over those fish on that piece of structure and they're not actively feeding, the advantages of this modified Lindy Rig is that you're going to cover more water and find those fish, and you can then target those fish specifically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the setup I like to use and the applications, and let's go through that. So first thing I've got here is a medium action rod. So I like to use either a medium action or a medium light action when it comes to the modified Lindy Rig. The nice thing about a medium action is a little bit stiffer backbone, and I like that for drifting trolling. The medium lights, I'll use that for my shore applications because it's got a little bit faster tip on it. Right here I've got a Fenwick Golden Wing medium action rod, and I've got that paired with the Pflueger reel. When it comes to rod and reel setups and brands, that's all preference and whatever you're confident in. So don't feel like you've got to go and buy the highest priced rod and reel out there. However, I am really preference towards Fenwick and Pfluegers. So whatever you like, stick with it. However, medium light actions, that's what I would go with. I'm running Fireline. Okay, so I got 8-pound Fireline on here. The reason I like that is it's a braid, and I can feel those taps and that sensitivity is increased a little bit with that braid. Now for the modified Lindy Rig itself, I'm going to set this down here and show you what I've got. We have a 1/8 ounce barrel weight on the main line. Please excuse my messy knot setup here at the bottom. I should probably run a bead underneath this, but I was in a hurry at the time. So for future reference, if you don't want any fraying from the weight itself, throw a bead underneath the weight here to protect your knot. That'll probably cost me in the long run. So I'm running a 1/8 ounce barrel weight. I'll run anywhere from 1/8 up to 1/4 ounce. And reason why I like the 1/8 is because if I'm drifting or trolling, I'm getting just enough bottom contact without getting to as many snags. If I'm running heavier weight, I find that I'm getting into more snags that way if I'm fishing a lot of lakes or something similar to that. If I'm fishing a river, that would be a good opportunity to go to a heavier weight. And if I'm fishing river, typically if I'm fishing this setup for a river, I'm casting out, letting the current do the work for me and push that bait in front of the fish, and I'm not doing too much messing with it and reeling it because I find that gets me more snags as well. Where a 1/4 ounce weight would be beneficial, or heavier weight, would be midday, real early in the season, or late in the season. If you're fishing from shore, a heavier weight is going to allow you to cast that bait further out and get it in front of the fish. So if they're in a little bit deeper water and they're not as tight to the shoreline, like in the evening or during spawn time, a heavier weight's going to get that bait out further and get in front of those fish's face. After my weight, I just have a barrel swivel, and then I've got my leader line. In this case, I'm running about 12 inches here of fluorocarbon. I like to run anywhere from 12 to 24 inches, and that really is just kind of dependent on the bite and time of day and what's working. You know, as fishermen, you experiment with setups and you see what the fish are wanting. The same thing goes with leader length in this setup. This has been working for me, so this is what I've got on here. At the very tail end, you got a couple options. I've got a floating jig head here. I don't have a ton of preference in color. Pretty much if the fish are feeding and they're active, they don't seem to care all that much on jig head color in my opinion. But I'm going to run a floating jig head or a hook. All right, a hook is good in cases where you've got live bait that is active. If you've got a leech, if you have a big minnow that I'm going to hook either by the dorsal fin or by the tail so that that minnow can move around off the bottom and give some action. The nice thing about the floating jig head is it puts that bait in front of the fish's face. So if I've got my weight sitting here on the bottom and I've got my floating jig head here about a foot off the bottom, I don't need as much activity from that live bait. So my go-to is leeches. All right, the bigger the leech, the better. Leeches are really active and they're more durable than worms. So if leeches come in, that's typically what I'm going to go with and use. However, this season, big minnows have been really productive. If I'm using a big minnow on a floating jig head, I like to hook it through the nose. It's in the target zone, so it's in front of the fish, so I don't have to worry so much about that fish moving around or being super active because it's already off the bottom. Fish that are in the area and are actively feeding are going to see that minnow. If I hook it through the nose, my hookup rates personally are better than hooking the minnow through its tail. The reason being, it seems like when the fish grabs that minnow that's hooked by the nose, they're grabbing most of that minnow at once. And vice versa, if I hook it through the tail, that fish is able to grab that minnow by the head and pull it off and maybe not catch the hook. Now, that could just be me personally having some bad luck that way this season, but that's just something to share with you guys that I've experienced personally. Another thing not to overlook for live bait is worms. So early in the season or in the evening when you got some peak bite times, a simple worm on a weight off the bottom, such as a split shot, can be dynamite for walleyes. And that's not necessarily a Lindy rig, so to speak, but can be really effective. I know we had one night already this season where my son just had a split shot and a worm right off a jetty and was catching more fish than anybody else on the bank with his little like Snoopy pole or whatever it is, Dock Demon I think is what it is. And so don't overlook a basic weight and worm on the bottom as well. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please post them here. Subscribe to the channel if you like these videos. Please let me know if there's any other videos you'd like me to do or talk about. I'm always looking for extra things to mention. I hope you guys enjoyed and get out there and catch some fish.